Always look both ways before crossing the street. It's one of the first safety rules we learn. It's an effective one because when we look both ways, we can see any vehicles that might hit us if we step into the road. We wait until any hazard passes and then cross the street safely. Staying safe by looking out for hazards ahead of time is a simple principle. When employers, employees, managers, and supervisors use this principle to improve safety in their facility, the process is called hazard recognition. In this program, we'll take a closer look at what hazard recognition is, how it works, and how you can use it to help keep yourself and your coworkers safe on the job. More than 3 million injuries and illnesses and more than 4,500 deaths. According to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, that's the yearly toll taken by workplace accidents. It's natural to think that all of these people are unlucky, but luck has nothing to do with it. The accidents and injuries that happen on the job are simply a matter of numbers. The more hazards there are in a workplace, the greater the risk that goes with working there. All that risk is basically accidents waiting to happen. And if nothing is done to prevent them, eventually those accidents will occur. There's a direct connection between the number of hazards in a workplace and the number of accidents, injuries, and fatalities that occur there. We can see that connection in a pyramid diagram. At the bottom is the total number of hazards that were found in a group of workplaces. The next level up is the number of accidents that almost happened as a result. These are called near misses. The level above that is the number of minor injuries that resulted from accidents that did happen. Next is the level showing the major injuries that were caused by the accidents, and at the top is the number of deaths that occurred. Now let's run the numbers. Every additional hazard at the bottom of the pyramid drives up the number of accidents, injuries, and fatalities above it. For every 20,000 hazards that exist, studies show there will be 1,500 near misses, 300 minor injuries, 27 major injuries, and 1 fatality. Depending on your work environment, the ratios between these numbers may vary. But no matter what your job is, when hazards go unnoticed or unrecognized, and nothing is done to control or eliminate them, accidents will happen. However, the diagram also illustrates something hopeful. When we drive down the number of hazards in the workplace, the other numbers go down too. The more hazards that we can identify, control, or eliminate, the fewer accidents, injuries, and fatalities will occur. This is the goal of hazard recognition, to make the workplace safer by finding the hazards and removing them or reducing their risk. There are 2 types of hazards that cause workplace accidents and injuries: hazardous conditions and unsafe acts. And most accidents are caused by a combination of the 2. Hazardous conditions are any situations you encounter in the workplace that could harm you. Spotting these conditions might seem like a no-brainer, especially when they're right in front of you. But many hazards are harder to identify than you think. Hazard recognition takes a systematic approach to this process, dividing risks into general categories. One way to organize them is by physical hazards, such as conditions that have the potential to cause you to fall or be struck by something, crushed, cut, burned, or electrocuted. Ergonomic hazards, such as situations that require frequent lifting, awkward movements, and repetitive motions, or that subject you to vibration. Chemical hazards, including hazmats, flammable substances, cleaning solutions, pesticides, and any fumes that these substances produce. And biological hazards, such as viruses, bacteria, mold, insects, and parasites. These are all hazardous conditions that become even more dangerous when they are combined with the unsafe acts that people perform. Unsafe acts are the opposite of safe work practices, and they make bad things happen. For example, changing a ceiling light 15 feet above the floor creates the potential for the physical hazard of falling. Having a forklift operator raise you up to the light fixture on the bare forks of his lift truck is an unsafe act, which makes falling a lot more likely. Climbing up to the fixture on a ladder you know is damaged is another type of unsafe act that can lead to trouble. Other examples of unsafe acts are pulling the grounding prongs out of the cords on your electric tools so you can plug them into two-prong outlets, or disconnecting a machine guard that gets in the way. But there's more. Unsafe acts are not only dangerous, they can also be habit-forming. Actions always have consequences, and often they're immediate. So normally we only have to put our hand on a hot stove once to learn that we shouldn't do it again. But at work, the consequences don't always occur right away. So when we get away with an unsafe act, we may say to ourselves, "Hey, I saved a lot of time here and nothing bad happened." Because we don't get burned the first time, we're tempted to do the same thing again. But every time we do it, we're coming closer to an accident, injury, or worse. Another problem is that some hazardous conditions and unsafe acts can be so obvious or general in nature that we may tend to overlook them. For example, hazards such as clutter or spills on the floor can lead to trips and falls. Insufficient lighting can hide other hazards so you can't see to avoid them. And exits that are locked or blocked but go unnoticed can be lethal in an emergency. Yet it's easy to get used to seeing these things and not thinking twice about them. Some unsafe acts can fly under the radar as well, such as having a couple of drinks before coming to work, cutting corners on safety when you're in a hurry, and assuming that someone else will deal with the hazard that you just noticed. Again, acts like these can be easy to get used to, but they can just as easily lead to trouble. Obviously, the best time to identify hazards is before they cause accidents or injuries. Hazard recognition uses 3 tools to do this: job hazard analysis, pre-shift and pre-operation inspections, and work permits. In job hazard analysis, a manager or supervisor studies a planned project or new task ahead of time to identify its potential hazards and develop ways to prevent or control them. Each job is broken down into lists of specific tasks. The supervisor then examines each step of every procedure, the location where it will be done, and any equipment that will be used to do it. Once the hazards associated with the tasks have been identified, a plan is developed to control or eliminate them. The plan may include administrative controls such as safe work practices and policies, engineering controls, which are physical safety measures that are built into the workplace, and having employees wear various types of personal protective equipment. Employees can play an important part in job hazard analysis as well. Since no one knows your work better than you do, your supervisor may ask for your input on the job and how to do it safely. Checking tools, machinery, and protective equipment before starting a job has always been an effective way to work more safely. Hazard recognition uses pre-shift and pre-operation inspections to make this process systematic. With hazard recognition, these inspections are required at the start of a shift or before beginning a particular task, and detailed checklists are developed to make sure they are thorough. As with job hazard analysis, you may be asked to contribute your knowledge of equipment that you use or tasks that you perform to creating these checklists. The work permits that are required for some risky procedures are the third tool that a hazard recognition program uses to identify potential hazards. In filling out a permit, the person who will be doing the work must list the task to be accomplished, the hazards that will be involved, the procedures that will control or eliminate the risks those hazards present, A manager or supervisor must review and approve the permit before the work can proceed. This work permit process helps ensure that no one starts a hazardous job without a thorough understanding of what the risks are and how to avoid them. We've talked about how we need to identify hazards before we begin to work. But to prevent as many accidents and injuries as possible, we also need to be able to identify and deal with them in real time. The hazard recognition process can help with this as well. At the start of the day and throughout your shift, make a habit of asking yourself, what are the hazards here? Try to spot any physical, ergonomic, chemical, or biological hazards. Look for places where you could fall, such as a scaffold or a wet work floor. Objects that could hit you, such as materials that are being transported or equipment with unguarded moving parts. What forms of hazardous energy are present? Pay special attention when electricity, steam, or hydraulic pressure is being used. Watch out for tasks that require heavy lifting or repetitive or awkward motion. Vibration from hand tools and machinery can also be harmful over time. Be aware of any potentially hazardous chemicals, cleaning products, or pesticides that you come into contact with. Remember, their fumes can be hazardous as well. Look for biological hazards, such as mold inside a ventilation system, or ticks or fire ant colonies on a work site. Ask yourself if the tools and equipment you'll be using are appropriate and in good working order. There can be some hazards associated with them that you should recognize. For instance, a diesel-powered forklift should not be used where there's limited ventilation. Electric-powered hand tools should not be used in wet conditions. Look for things such as rickety ladders, frayed power cords, hammers. They cause problems, and recognizing hazards after the fact is better than not knowing why something happened at all. When accidents do happen, it's crucial to learn as much as possible about why they occurred so they can be prevented from happening again. That's the goal of accident investigation. Accident investigation searches for the root causes of what happened. On the surface, these might appear to be obvious, but the circumstances behind accidents can be more complicated than you might think. For example, take the case of a stockroom worker who fell off a stepladder. Co-workers say that the employee was standing on the very top step of the ladder when they fell. That's an unsafe act, and it goes against the company's standard operating procedures. But is it the root cause of the accident? When investigators looked more closely, they discovered that the stepladder was the tallest ladder in the facility, but was still not tall enough to reach the highest shelves in the stockroom safely. The employee who fell had to stand on the top step to get to those shelves. This type of information can determine what measures will really be effective in controlling or eliminating a workplace hazard. The obvious cause of the ladder accident was an employee performing an unsafe act. but the root cause is an equipment problem. In this situation, to prevent a similar accident from happening in the future, the company will need to buy a taller ladder for the stockroom. It's important to remember that what you know could be essential to an accident investigation, even if you did not witness the accident firsthand. If you are familiar with the task being performed at the time of the accident or the location where it occurred, you could provide key information. As we've seen, hazard recognition can help drive down the number of accidents and injuries that occur in the workplace by first identifying hazards and then controlling or eliminating them. Let's review. Most accidents and injuries result from a combination of hazardous conditions and unsafe acts. Hazard recognition tries to find hazards and neutralize them ahead of time. The hazard recognition process looks for categories of risks, such as physical, ergonomic, chemical, and biological hazards. Once you identify the potential hazards in your work area, you need to take steps to protect yourself and your coworkers. An accident investigation determines an accident's root cause, so steps can be taken to prevent similar incidents from happening again. When you see hazards coming, it's a lot easier to avoid them. Now that you understand the principles and procedures behind hazard recognition, you have the tools you need to head hazards off at the pass and make your facility a safer place to work every day.